You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Getting a little better at this.
We're doing okay. Well, welcome. So you were just sharing some interesting news. And it actually will segue nicely into the episode. So go ahead and share with the class what you just shared with me.
Yeah, of course. Hello, class.
Hi.
Class and Jordan. So like recently I've been going to a lot of doctors. I've been dealing with some like high blood pressure shit that like seemingly has, I don't know. As I have nicotine lined up with the fucking caffeine right here. No one knows why it's happening. Can't guess. But in doing that, they did what they do. They did a CTA. It's like a CT with contrast of my arteries. They like inject you with this like shit, and then they can see that shit in your arteries, and it makes it like more opaque, so they can see if there's any occlusions or any like blockages in your arteries. So I did that for my renal arteries into the kidneys, because if you have constriction of the blood flow to your kidneys, then your body sees that as one of the vital organs of your body is not getting enough blood flow. So it jacks up your blood pressure so that you get more blood perfusion to your kidneys. So they were checking for that. It's a very high quality image. It's like a gold standard for diagnosis for those types of things, but you can also see the spine on this image. And I've had spinal imaging before. Like in school, we got a bunch of x-rays and shit for no reason, just because people had to learn how to take x-rays. But I've always had like a relatively healthy spine, no major abnormalities or anything like that. But what they found was an L5 spondylolisthesis on this CTA, which, if you don't know what that means, which why the fuck would you know what that means unless you're a chiropractor? It basically means that there's like basically the joints in which your spine articulate, your vertebra articulate with the one below and above. They're called facet joints, and those are like kind of just like two small sliding surfaces. And then there's a bone, like a cylindrical bone, that attaches that to the vertebral body, called the pars interarticularis. So when you break that bilaterally, typically, you see one of the vertebrae kind of shifts backwards because of gravity and weight bearing and the curvature of the spine. So I have that, which is like, I've talked about this on the podcast before. This is probably 2-3 years ago at this point, maybe like 23. I talked about like re-racking a jerk onto my back and herniating a disc, which I thought it was herniating a disc. It turns out I broke my spine. I gave myself a spondylolisthesis in that incident, which is something that's like, it's really interesting to me because I do still get neurological symptoms from it. Like if I introduce like back squatting, snatching, like barbell work in general, for the first time after not doing it for a while, that increase in axial load, I'll have probably for 2 days like numbness down the entire left side, like my left like glute into my entire left leg. And I'm like, yeah, that sucks. And I just keep doing the things that I'm doing. But it's funny to me that like this, I rehabbed it myself. I've hit PRs, like lifetime PRs since then. It's not something that necessarily inhibits my performance. But it's interesting to me to like after the fact find out that like, oh, you thought this was a disc herniation, but actually you broke your spine, dumbass. And that to me is like, it's really interesting because a lot of people have injuries. They'll have like different things that maybe they get diagnosed, maybe they don't, maybe they get like a half-assed diagnosis with no imaging. That's like maybe just like a junk diagnosis. And then they're a victim to that diagnosis forever. And a lot of that I think comes from both the way that they physically, physiologically, and emotionally react to the pain of that injury. And I think that's a really interesting topic that we can kind of dive into on this episode, because I know that that's something that's right in your wheelhouse. You've done a lot of research on it. It's something that you have pretty strong opinions about. But I think both of us can talk about this from plenty of experience, but also like more of a theoretical and like in practice, in application, like what can we take from this?
Yeah. So I think out of the gate, there's probably two things to differentiate. the differentiation between pain and an injury,
Yeah.
and the differentiation between pain and nociception. I think
Mm.
those are probably the things that need the most clarification out of the gate. And then I think what we should do is we should probably go into like defining pain. So first, pain and injury, right? So injury is just tissue damage, right? Injury is something resembling structural damage to a system, tissue, whatever, right? So there's different types of pain, which we're kind of jumping around here, but let's maybe we table the types of pain for later. So pain and injury, pain is an experience, it's an emotion, it's a drive state, and it's a sensation. Right? So there's like kind of four things that we can classify pain. Where an injury is just the presence of tissue damage. Now, where it gets tricky is you can have tissue damage with no pain, and you can have no tissue damage with pain. Right? So there's something else afoot when it comes to the experience of pain rather than tissue damage, because we've controlled for the variable, and we've seen in times where there's no tissue damage that there's immense amounts of pain, and then in times where there is tissue damage and there's no pain, right? So for example, there's like the famous one is, I think it was somewhere in the UK back in the day, that someone had like fallen off a ladder and a nail had gone through their boot, and this person was in agonizing pain. So they brought him in and they imaged it with the boot on, and they figured out that the nail actually went between the toes and it didn't puncture the foot at all. So here you had the experience of pain, this unpleasant perception, and it devoid of any tissue damage. Like the pain this guy felt was real, until which point he was sort of validated and verified that there's no tissue damage, and then the experience subsided. And then if you take the easy one is talking about the low back, there's been so many studies done on the presence of disc protrusions, bulges, herniations, etc., in the absence of pain, right? So studies that are based on this type of research, the methods are to find asymptomatic people without pain, the experience of pain in the low back, MRI them, check for any disc herniations, and what they see, I think one of them, if we're talking disc protrusions, I think it was 52% of 100 to 52 out of 98 people had disc protrusions, and the entire cohort was asymptomatic, so no pain. So it's like there right away starts to should make you think, right? Because the study of pain is really a study of the brain. And this is where it gets tricky, right? Because the brain has so many like redundancy systems to it, right? So without kind of turning this into a neuroanatomy lesson, I think the best way to talk about pain is, hold on, let me make sure we checked all the boxes. So we've talked about pain and injury. Done. We know the difference between pain and injury. We're there. Injury, tissue damage, pain, negative, experience, perception, drive state, and emotion. What was next? Pain and injury. Okay, pain and nociception. This is where we're going to start to enter into the conversation of neuroscience. So nociception, or nociceptors, so nociception is carried by nociceptors, are like these free nerve endings that are the sensory component to the experience of pain. You needed every word in that sentence, right? So the sensory component of the experience of pain, which meaning the sensation enough doesn't equate for the experience. It's not like sense equals experience, right? And it's like people have talked about pain as like somewhat of an illusion, and I think that's a good way to look at pain in some respects. Like the thing that comes to mind is, do you remember the blue dress, white dress, gold dress Facebook thing?
I remember. I never experienced it, but I do.
Well,
remember.
okay. Well, what color? Did you know what color you saw? Do you remember?
I don't know. I saw the color that it was. I don't know.
That everyone saw the color that it was.
Exactly.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point.
Exactly.
So
that's my final answer.
Yeah, it was this sort of like, it was this phenomenon that it was really about perception. It was about visual perception, and some people, depending on the way that and we'll kind of get into the details of this in a bit, but depending on the way someone has perceived, I think it was actually the technical part of it was how you perceive the light in the room to be. That was the thing that adjusted your visual perception. Or another one is, have you ever seen the I forget what the actual experiment is called, but the experiment is there's 3 or 4 people wearing white t-shirts and 3 or 4 people wearing black t-shirts, and they're passing a basketball to one another. And then the
Yeah.
gorilla
There's like a
walks in. Have you
gorilla.
seen that?
Yeah.
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 Do you remember the first time that you saw that?
Briefly. Yeah.
Were
You're
you
like,
were did you fall into the illusion? Like, did you see the gorilla?
no, I didn't.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
And so, okay, this is where like the illusoriness of pain as a sensation comes into play, because vision is a really good proxy, right? So I think the thing that we have to respect about sensation is that our, whatever this is, our experience, the fact that there's something to whatever it is to be us, is like kind of a weird hodgepodge of stimuli, transducers. Because it's like, if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, so like everything that we see falls within 0.00035% of the electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light, what we can see from red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet, all of that falls within 0.00035% of the electromagnetic spectrum. So gamma rays, X-rays, all of that stuff is on this spectrum, and we have no way of sensing it. We just don't have like the transducers to take this signal and process it into a conscious experience. And so what I like about the parallel here is when you look at the gorilla thing, right? And like the white t-shirts and the black t-shirts, and then the prompt for the participant and who's watching the study is, how many times does the white team pass the ball to one another? And this is where it gets really tricky, is your perception is a calculation. So your sensations are what are called prediction error signals. And what that means is your brain is generating your reality. Like there's no sunshine inside your head. Your brain is inside of a dark skull with no light that goes into it. But yet we see this whole thing. We experience this whole thing in full color. So what happens in that gorilla study is that when you're prompted to say, hey, look for the white team passing the ball to one another, your perceptual weighting of the sensation of the visual inputs of white goes way, 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 way up, right? And all your eyesight is doing is looking for the error signals between the white thing. So you're amplifying the presence of whiteness in the video. And the thing that's interesting is why they use a gorilla is because the gorilla doesn't throw enough error signals for you to pay attention to it, right? So you're up weighting. So it's, your precision weighting for the white experience of, and that's going to sound like an absolutely terrible clip when someone I look guilty when someone clips that on YouTube. But when you're up weighting the precision, you're increasing the precision weighting of the white experience of like, okay, when the photons hit my retina and the brain generates this white, I'm optimizing for that. And the what makes this experiment so clever is that the gorilla is close enough to a person wearing all black, right? There's the subtle differences of like, the face and like obviously like the fur, but because you're weighting of, okay, my sensory optimization or my sensory experience, my visual sensory experience is up regulated to optimize for the input of white. The gorilla being this, walks in on 2 legs, kind of stands in the middle, it beats his chest. Your brain doesn't sense it, right? It doesn't perceive it, maybe a better word. And that is really telling of the way that the experience of pain works, because there is an illusoriness to pain. Because pain, like vision, the sensation from a nociceptor doesn't equal the experience of some mind-independent reality. right? And that's like a very tricky concept to understand. But like I said earlier, you have to understand how the brain works. The brain is generating our perceptions, and our senses are fact checking them, right? They're looking for what are called prediction errors, which means our brain has this idea based off of our experience of this in the past, right? What our raw sensory data tells us, and something that's like attributed to, or what's called like a normative value. So I'll give you an example. I live in San Francisco, right? And it's an interesting place to live. I spend a lot of time in Colorado now. Now, when I sit in the coffee shop downstairs in my building, shout out Emerald Cafe and Lounge. If something were to walk in, and I were on my laptop, we had a call this morning. I took it from the coffee shop. And if something were to walk in with 4 legs, like a quadruped, without picking up a lot of sensory data, I would assume it's a dog, right? And it would take, or a homeless person doing the old fentanyl fold, taking a shit in the lobby. One of the two things, right?
Highly
But
probable.
I wouldn't assume it's a bear. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how this works, like how my peripheral perception of a 4-legged creature off the streets of San Francisco, how it works is like, okay. And I wrote an article of this on my Substack a few weeks ago about like Bayesian inference and like how people make up their mind. And it's actually a really interesting, and I think a really topical or timely topic because, and I'm not going to get too political here, but think of, you're from Pennsylvania, right?
That I am.
I would assume, based off very little information, that Pennsylvania swung pro-Trump in the last election.
They very much swing that way.
Right. Okay.
We actually are a swing state, so it is kind of on the fence. But where I come from, yeah, oh yeah, it's pretty liberal in Philadelphia, which is like the most densely populated area. But outside of that, a lot less densely populated, but a lot more red.
Yeah, it probably used to be more populated, and then the red people took care of that.
Yeah, they're working on it.
So here's my point. One of the things that was, I enjoy politics as somewhat of like a guilty pleasure, but I don't talk about it often because it's an absolute snake pit. But one of the cases for Trump and his second term was the this adage that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. That's actually not true. Because let's walk this out. Because it's all of this equation, right? It's this Bayesian inference equation, which is basically your perception of anything, or even your perception period, which is what we're going to talk about, is based off of 3 factors. Okay, so if we're solving for this, what we're solving for is the sum total of these 3 factors. One, the raw sensory data. What are we getting in real time, right? The second, so the equation would be basically raw sensory data times your prior experience over a normative value. So let's play this out in the case of the dog in the coffee shop. So if I'm at my laptop, me, you, and Matt are on a call, I perceive in my corner of my eye what I'm generating as a dog. Right? It's enough sensory data, but it's not a lot, but it's some. Okay, I know it's 4-legged creature. It's probably furry and it's not super big. My brain just goes, dog, because my prior experience of sitting in a coffee shop and seeing dogs walk in, that second value is weighted super, super high, right? So I don't need a ton of raw sensory data to generate this. And a normative value, have I seen do dogs go in coffee shops? Yes, they do. Right. Now let's play this out in Colorado. Or let's play out 2 scenarios. Let's play out the first in Colorado, where I'm sitting in a coffee shop, I'm on the call, everything is the same. The raw sensory data is the exact same, but the normative value, and let's say my prior experience, that bears have walked into coffee shops before. I'm going to generate a bear as the 4-legged creature, right? So with the same amount of sensory data, but a different prior experience and a different normative value, my perception is going to change. Right? Now let's take San Francisco and let's make a bear walk in. If I'm sitting in the coffee shop in San Francisco, I'm going to need that first value of raw sensory data to really say bear before it outweighs my normative value of dogs walk into coffee shops. I've never once seen a bear in a coffee shop in San Francisco. And that prior data is, I've personally never seen that happen. right? So it's like I'm going to have to collect way more. So it's like that thing has to be 3 or 4 feet away from me, let's say, for the raw sensory data to balance the equation that my perception equals bear. There's obviously like a twink reference in there somewhere with San Francisco, but we're going to leave it alone. But it's like, so that's how perception works. Now let's play that out with pain. Nociception is the raw sensory data of pain, but we have prior experience of things hurting. So we've done things before that have hurt us, and doing it again will heighten that overall perception. And we have a normative value of like understanding whether or not things hurt or not. So for example, I remember in college, I got in an altercation. I got sucker punched at a bar, and I found the kid who told the guy to do it. It was a whole thing. And I found him in the university parking lot like 2 weeks later. I was just walking back from some lecture, and I was walking through the parking lot. And I saw this kid. I'm like, your time. So in the middle of broad daylight, I grabbed him by the shirt collar and I pinned him to the ground. And I just held my fist over his face, like cocked it back, stood over him, and he began to cry. Now, he'd probably never gotten a physical altercation in his life. So let's like play this out. So he is in this moment generating the perception of pain. I have not hit him yet. So let's play out the equation. Raw sensory data, there's nothing. It's not super comfortable to get thrown to the ground, but you're not going to cry about it. So the raw sensory data is not really registering a lot of weight. His prior experience, like maybe he's been punched in the face, maybe not. If not, he deserved it. But the normative value of does getting punched in the face hurt? Yeah, every single time you watch a movie and some guy just gets drilled in a parking lot, like with his head pinned to the cement, it hurts. So he's starting to cry, and that's how the equation plays out. So there's nothing. The nociception, the raw sensory data part of the equation, is a part of this prior experience and this normative value. So when we look at pain and the experience of pain, and without getting into like, the insular cortex and the anterior and posterior and the emotion and the perception, just looking at the experience of pain or the perception of pain, it is a sense. But like all of our senses, it's governed by our perception. And that's where so many people go wrong, right? So for you have probably, I hope, back squatted more times in your life without pain than with pain.
I would like to hope that as well, but I don't know this true.
Right. Yeah. You may be 51-49.
Yeah.
But and this is where pain gets cyclical and tricky, is if you think about your prior experience of performing a movement that's painful, right? It starts to compound, because if you do it and the act of doing it, knowing it's going to be painful, forces you to engage the nociceptive pathway that causes the sensory data to register as painful. You are now re-uploading a more potent prior experience for next time, right? And I think that there's a lot of offshoots that we can take from this, but I think the big takeaway for most people is understanding that the perception of pain, at least like in our world, talking about like nociceptive pain, is in fact cyclical. And the number one priority, if you understand what values are weighted in our perceptions, is how do we break the cycle? Because it is cyclical, and pain will run the fuck away from you. And chronic pain itself, and it sounds like a little bit of like a kind of a useless totality, but at a certain point, what you're treating is pain, is the cycle of pain. So when if you come across either in your own life or in your practice, whatever that looks like, pain, you need to break that cycle of pain as a priority. So that's like sort of a high level. It's like, okay, we need to understand perception. We'll understand a little bit about neuroanatomy, understand the difference between pain and injury, and understand the difference between the experience of pain and the contribution of nociception as the sensory component of the perception of pain.
That's a fucking mouthful. It's funny because, like, I don't know. Sometimes it's scary how similarly you and I think of things. Like, you say these things, I'm like, yeah, that's it. No comment. But but the way that I look at this in application, it does look at it kind of eerily similar in those ways, even though I've never like dove into it in that kind of depth or with those specific words. But I'll try and fit it into that framework in the way that I kind of go through this with clients, because that's very well thought out and organized. But I guess where my mind goes with this is it's a conversation around prior experience and the perception of that sensory input, right? Do you like lamb?
Do I like lamb? Yeah, dog. Come on, you know me and you are both leb at heart.
That's right. I'm, you know. So I grew up
Habibi,
eating lamb.
come on. Yeah, let's go.
I grew up eating lamb, and I think lamb is fucking delicious. Like I
It's
prefer
nice.
it to beef sometimes, but it's got a very distinct taste. And if
The lamb
someone were to
taste.
make it to our age, 35 in life, and never have lamb, and have it for the first time, it might be off-putting, right? So the sensory input there is exactly the same, like the taste. It doesn't taste different for me and you, but I have that, or X person that hasn't had lamb before, and I've had it before. I have prior experience of this being enjoyable, so I have a positive perception that the sensory input is going to be positive with this. Someone that doesn't have that prior experience, they don't really know what to expect. So maybe they're projecting expectations around this. Maybe they have, some sort of, it's a red meat. It's kind of fatty. It looks like beef. Maybe they expect that it's going to taste like beef, and it doesn't. And that might be off-putting to them, right? That might end up being a negative experience, right? So going into this, the sensory input's exactly the same. I'd say what you call the normative value. I'd say that's pretty much the same, like a red meat that you're being served at a restaurant. But the thing that's going to differ there is the prior experience, their perception of what the expectation around this is going to be, right? They might very much dislike it because of their prior experience, even though the sensory input, the piece of lamb is relatively, it's the same, right? It's, say I'm sharing that plate with someone, it's exactly the same then, right? So I think of that as I can overlay that same concept with exercise. And the two populations that I think, like the people that grow up eating lamb, say an athlete, they grow up putting themselves through grueling workouts, and they have this perception, this whether that sensory input of this is what a workout will be like. I'm going to get sore. I'm going to get tired. My heart rate's going to be elevated. I'm going to be sweating. The next day I'm going to wake up and feel a little groggy. Okay, great. You have this kind of this prior experience with this relationship between sensations and exercise versus someone that makes it to 35 years old or even older a lot of times in life, and they've never exercised before. They don't have that prior experience to influence their perception of what the sensation is, right? So right then and there, there's this kind of deviation between the way that people's prior experience is going to interact with their relationship with exercise, right? Like I grew up, I played baseball, and I can even, like, I've thought about this a lot lately. Like when did I start to build that relationship with like pain and like being able to push through, and where do people miss that in life? And I remember, like, fuck, dude, I was probably like 9 years old. I was just throwing baseball. Like I think I was playing outfield that year, and we're like fucking throwing long toss baseballs. And like I remember, like, my shoulder just hurting, like probably the worst pain I felt in my life up to that point. Like I couldn't fucking move it. I had like a dead arm, and my coach was like, "Yeah, you'll be fine. Just get back out there." And like for days and weeks after that, like it changed the way I threw. I ended up throwing like sidearm playing baseball all the way up until high school because like of that incident. And I'm thinking back, like I still have problems with my right shoulder. I probably tore my rotator cuff or my labrum, or like there was some sort of like structural damage with that. But coach was like, "Get the fuck back in there, kid." Like what, are you a pussy? Like, no, I don't want to be a pussy. I'm gonna get the fuck back in there. But like even that, and then like growing up wrestling, and like the side that adds to it, that you're like nutrient deprived for 4 months at least out of the year, and like pushing through these workouts. And like I've had injuries. I've had like sprained ankles. I had a low back injury. I've had all kinds of injuries wrestling. And it's just like par for the course. So I grew up with this relationship around exercise that like, okay, like I've had pain. I've had nociception telling me like, "Yo, this is a bad idea, homie." And I'm like, "You shut the fuck up. I'm going to do this," my entire life. And there's these people that like, they never develop that relationship. They have a very comfortable life, especially someone that's coming to train later in life that's never had exercise experience, and they've never had any real injuries that they've had to overcome. Like, they're going to have such a different perception around what pain is than someone that's had real injuries, overcome those injuries, pushed through those injuries towards some like overarching goal, something that's like pulling them towards it. So that in itself, like someone with, take away like physiological capacity, someone that does like 5 sets of 20 walking lunges, that has done walking lunges before, like they're going to have some sort of prior experience informing them that, all right, this is what this is going to feel like. There's going to be uncomfortable sensations, like the muscles are going to start to burn. There's going to be like a pump in that area. You can get additional blood flow. Your heart rate's going to be high. You're going to start sweating. Versus someone that hasn't done them before, this is all a new experience to them. And maybe times that they felt these things in the past, they've associated with something negative, something that's not good, not beneficial. And that's like, in my mind, where I try and build that perception around what is pain versus what is discomfort, right? And that conversation, to me, it looks like pain is something that, in this like this specific sense, and you may disagree, or it might not apply to other senses, but pain in like an exercise sense, to me, is something that it's going to have a negative adaptation, right? If there is nociception, if there is tissue damage, and I continue to further that stimulus, there's going to be some sort of negative adaptation around it. Like I'm going to make worse tissue damage, or I'm going to create worse inflammation. And it's not going to be something that's going to be favorable in the long term to keep eliciting that sensation. Versus an uncomfortable sensation when it comes to exercise, doing lunges, doing greater volume, greater intensity over time. It's very uncomfortable. There's a level of discomfort associated with this, but it's not going to create a negative adaptation. It's actually going to create a positive outcome if we can push through these things. So it's kind of forcing people to understand their perception around what they're actually feeling and interpreting that to be, okay, this is something that will be favorable if I continue to do it. And that, it takes time and it takes exposure to build that relationship with those sensations, versus someone that's been through this, like they already have that exposure. And that's like, in application, that's where it comes down to this in like a rehab process, or like even just a training process of someone that has those prior experiences and how that shapes their perception of the sensations that they're feeling, versus someone that doesn't have those same experiences, and how now it becomes an opportunity to be able to shape that moving forward.
So there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of dig in on from like a practitioner perspective. And that's, if someone comes in with no experience, like you said, which is commonly the people that we're going to interact with and people who listen to this podcast are going to interact with, what do they lack? Well, they lack everything. So let's go through the raw sensory data. And I like the lamb analogy, and I want to dig in on that first. It's really about weighting. Okay. So we have 3 values that are weighted against one another. And when it comes to the raw sensory data, this is where things like, foam rolling and Theraguns and all of these other things, they offer us something else to feel. So think of the lamb thing. If someone has a developed palate, there's a precision weighting to the sensory data that's fed, right? Like, we're in the Bay Area, coffee, wine, the snobs up in Napa Valley. Oh, this has like a chocolate mango. I was like, it's fucking, what are you talking about? But like, do I doubt that they are perceiving that? No. Is there something different about their sensory data? Well, it's probably been aligned with different prior experiences and normative values. And that palette example is, you can increase the precision weighting of their sensory data. And that's where and it's so hilarious to me to watch, frankly, morons argue about the efficacy. Like when you know enough about the brain to just be humbled as fuck, and then to turn around and see someone doing a reel about why foam rolling doesn't work. It's like, okay, foam rolling may not have any structural change. You probably know that it doesn't. But does foam rolling offer a novel sensation in place of a low precision weighted nociceptive stimulus that then helps shift the prior? And does the idea that foam rolling and its popular marketing of it reducing pain, does that actually change your normative value? And does someone telling you or you doing it before with the anticipation that it was going to help, does all of that actually come together as a really potent tool of decreasing your perception of pain? Yeah, likely. But someone goes, it doesn't break up scar tissue, it doesn't work. It's like, sir, the adults are talking. Get the fuck out of here. Take your ball and go home, right? Because it is very complex. But I think it's something where, from a practitioner's perspective, we can affect each value in the equation that generates, and I do use the word generate very deliberately, generates a perception of pain, right? You can increase precision weighting of raw sensory data. Vibration, skin stretch, light touch, and deep pressure are all mechanoreceptors that will, it's like kind of pain gate theory, that will transduce a different sensory experience in the brain. Right now, is that going to do it? No, but is it a part of the model that regulates a perception of pain? Yes, absolutely. So that's one thing you can do. Second is prior, right? So that's like the second value above the line, which is their prior experience. This is where exercise selection, in my mind, really fits into this equation. Is you can start to do things that are technique adjacent to particular exercises, giving them novel and graded exposures to movements that are similar but not the exact same. So you can start to build confidence in a prior that's similar enough to a movement, so when they bridge the gap to that movement, they have enough confidence and experience in a pain-free perception of similar joint angles that they're not going to weight that value of a painful perception of a prior exposure as high. This really flies in the face of the basic rehab model of just start light and then build your way up. It's because, like, okay, once you hit that number where they perceived pain before and you don't have some sort of novel experience in different positions, which I think physically, physiologically, and psychologically offer benefits, then they're probably going to be more liable to fall back into that trap and that to start to change their perception. And the last one is the normative value. And this one's really potent in rehab. So whenever I do rehab, which is often, the question I'm going to get, and sometimes not even a question, where it's like a statement, is like, my ex, knee, hip, low back, shoulder, whatever, hurts. And the second, and I see it happen in real time. The second I go, yeah, it's supposed to. The second you license that experience, you decrease that normative value, right? Mm-hmm. The second you go like, yeah, do you know what that surgery was like? You weren't there. Like, you were there, but like you weren't there. Like, here, I'm going to show you a YouTube video of the two guys taking garden tools to your shoulder or your spine or your knees. Like, see that there? That's a DeWalt. That's a drill. That's a hammer. That's a steel rod. And like that, normalizing that value for them shifts the entire perception, right? Because it's not this thing that's unexpected and big and scary. You're arriving right on time. Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's so funny. Like, if you do that, if you think of like, okay, how is pain perceived and where can I intervene? It's like, can we increase the precision weighting of the raw sensory data? Yes, absolutely. Right. Can we change the prior experience? It's like, yeah, I mean, if you're a manual therapist and you can like legally touch people, passive range of motion, pain-free passive range of motion is like your small end of the wedge that you jam into the door for you to then kick the thing open. And it's like, if you can achieve some motion, then you got a piece on the board. Right. And it's like that starts to change their ouch, it hurts when I move my knee. Is your knee moving? Yeah, I'm moving it for them, or their hip or their back or whatever. But they start to experience, hip movement or knee movement or ankle movement without experiencing pain. We're playing the game now. We're working the equation. We're working that perceptual equation, and then really justifying their experience. And that sort of shifts the normative value for them. And they go, wow, I don't weight this as scary anymore. It's like, yeah, you know what? You're probably going to be looking at a few weeks of this, but we're going to go through every day and we're going to learn something new, and we're going to learn how to move without pain. And we're going to increase the percent, maybe don't say this, but from a practitioner perspective, I'm going to increase the precision weighting of that raw sensory data. I'm going to experience novel and new pain-free motion for you to experience. and all the while validate your normative value of your experience. And then it's like, dude, I mean, it's not magic, it's neuroscience, but when you understand like the factors at play, pain, now don't get me wrong, it's still complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because like each one of these has about 20 hours worth of lecture material. And one that I think may be worth lingering on with the time we have today is the idea of nociceptive sensitization. Because I think this is where a lot of rubber hits the road for most people. And this is where things like acetaminophen, ibuprofen, fucking drugs. This is where drugs come into play. This is where drugs can consistently and reproducibly, because what they do, what is a cyclooxygenase inhibitor going to do? It's going to decrease inflammation or inhibit the pathway of inflammation. And what does inflammation do? It increases the sensitivity of nociceptors, right? But it's like, what else could increase the sensitivity of nociceptors? One, decreasing systemic inflammation, right? Having a diet that's not just all fucking omega-6s and, you know, managing your stress, decreasing inflammation systemically without the use of drugs can help downregulate nociceptive sensitivity. But then also all the shit that we talked about, all the practices that people get up to. Why does stretching work? Because it offers a higher precision weighted raw sensory data value. Because Golgi tendon organ reflexes get to the brain at 120 meters per second, where nociception at most gets there at 20 meters per second, right? So I think from a practitioner standpoint, when we think of like rubber hitting the road, prescriptive elements in a common sense, in a bit of like in a paper towel roll, understand what nociceptive pain is and understand that if we're only looking at that, the goal is to downregulate the sensitize or downregulate the sensitivity or desensitize nociceptors by any means necessary. And then the other stuff, you know, it's a little bit more psychological and strategic in nature as far as prior exposures and normative values. But it's like, that's why some things work and some things don't, right? I listened to a podcast the other day and it was talking just about drugs. It's like, oh, well, I give Flexerol and I give this and I give that. And it's like, okay, we're all just playing in this one pool of raw sensory data, figuring out different strategic ways to downregulate the sensitivity of nociceptors. There's two other things that are going to move the needle, by the way. So that's like where I think most practitioners would be set to maybe understand what they do in their practice, how that actually works in conjunction with everything else.
Yeah. And I think something people need to realize is that pain is not an all or nothing response, right? Like if we think of other physiological pathways, like muscle contraction, it's all or nothing. Once you hit a threshold, that muscle is going to contract and then it's going to relax, right? You're getting either full contraction or you're not, right? On a muscle fiber level. Pain is not the same, but people's perception of pain can be the same, especially when we're talking about rehab, is that a lot of times people ask, does that hurt? Or do you feel the pain? And the answer is going to be yes. Like, yeah, it's going to fucking hurt. Like you said, it should hurt. Like you just had that surgery. You just had tissue damage. You have an injury that's ongoing. Like, yeah, it's going to fucking hurt. But it doesn't matter if it hurts or not. What matters is that pain relative to that pain in the past. Right. And I think that's something that if you have that understanding and you can build that dialogue between your client and yourself, then that at least gives you room to work and gives you room to have improvement that's not just in the realm of check this box if it hurts, don't check it if it doesn't. Because you can have a very meaningful decrease in the amount of pain that someone's feeling in a very short amount of time, just with that sensitization that you're talking about, or desensitization, right? If we can get if someone's been immobilized after an ACL surgery for 6-8 weeks, okay, you take them out of that brace and you start moving that knee, yeah, it's going to fucking hurt. You haven't done that in 8 weeks. You haven't used those muscles. There hasn't been any meaningful motor input to that area in a long time. Like, it's going to feel like shit. Okay. But rep 0, it should feel like shit. Rep 5, yeah, it's probably going to feel like shit. But set 3, set 4, set 5, it should feel better, right? As you get exposure. Like when I was first interning for chiropractic school, I was working with this doc that loved to bill for neuromuscular re-education, right? It's a very vague term. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. It means that you moved in an area that hasn't been moved, or you moved in a way, or you taught someone how to use an area. There's like a time distinction for it, but there's no like actual procedural distinction for it. But he loved to bill for that because it pays a fuck ton. So he'd be like, yeah, go do some P and F on that person so we can bill for neuromuscular reeducation. What does that mean? And I remember asking him, and he like literally described it in paraphrasing, of course, but like in a very similar way. But really what we need to do is it comes down to perception, right? There's a conscious level of perception and there's a subconscious level of perception that we need to tap into both. Is that they're going to, you say this all the time, pain is like it's an emotional response, but it's learned, right? We learn pain. Like we learn to move in a way that reduces the pain input to our brain. So what we need to do is we need to teach them that they can move this way. And not only just teach them that they can move this way, but teach them that this is going to be a positive response if we continue to move this way. And this is the way to not get out of pain, because that's an all or nothing relationship, but downregulate the amount of pain that they're feeling by learning how to coordinate the musculature in this area, by creating movement so we can create blood flow, so we can reduce inflammation in this area. And that's something that people literally need to learn. Like we need to re-educate them on a neuromuscular level. Like this is a valid concept. It's a valid idea, but it's just bastardized in the way that people bill for it and people kind of lump it into an ICD-10 code. But it is a process where people need to understand that, like, no, it's not all or nothing. It's this pain relative to this pain 3 sets ago. It's this pain relative to this pain 3 weeks ago. It's this pain relative to this pain 6 months ago. And that's what we're trying to do. And a lot of times if there is tissue damage and if there is a surgical intervention, the structural component of the way that we interact with that body region is going to change indefinitely. It's not going to be the same after that injury, after that surgery than it was before. So there needs to be an ongoing perception or an ongoing awareness of how we can use this body and or how we can use this region and what we need to do on a continual ongoing basis to downregulate that pain, because it might not be something that ever gets to, all right, we're not checking that box. Like it might always feel different, or it might always feel something. But as long as that something is not as significant as it once was, and it's trending in the right direction, and it allows them to have the level of function that they need to have to accomplish the tasks that they need to accomplish, then that's rehab. It's not all or nothing. It's that area relative to where that area was previously that was inhibiting function, that was painful, that caused a compensation pattern, and that did have negative effects upstream or downstream from it. And I think that's an important thing to think about when you're talking about rehab, when you're talking about clients with pain, is that it's not all or nothing. It's relative to what it once was. And that's something that once pain diminishes or decreases or even goes away, people forget it instantly. Like they don't remember how much pain or how debilitating it was once it's gone, because it's not that constant perception. It's not in their consciousness all the time. So I think that's a really important point to take away from this.
And I think one thing that I want to close on is the idea of quality movement. And what defines quality, because I've used this phrase a few times, and the idea is of increasing precision of your raw sensory data, right? So increasing the precision weighting of your raw sensory data. So let's take an exercise that has a skill component to it, and let's break it down in like a true motor learning standpoint of like, okay, we're going to kind of run this equation again. The idea of like a walking lunge, it's something where if you don't have exposure to it, it's going to look a little bit shaky. But what does shakiness look like? Right? It's not like, I'm not talking necessarily about the physical tremor associated with bad technique. I'm talking about just like, the qualitative aspect of it looking relatively inefficient. So what is that? It's like, well, they have some exposure, enough prior exposure to this exercise to know how to perform it, to know to put one foot. They've watched you do it. They saw people do it online, whatever. But they have their raw sensory data. So what happens is they watch you do it and they're generating a model, right? We call it a motor pattern. And this is like the actual definition of motor pattern, not like when someone just like does something like, oh, you have really bad motor patterns. It's like, no, this is like the actual how this works from like a neuroscientific level. So they're generating this pattern based off of prior exposure. Not prior exposure from input of raw sensory data, anything other than their eyes. It's not like they've done this before. So they have this generative model, right? So they have this file in their head that's walking lunge, and they have their raw sensory data. Now, if they're not well trained, and we haven't focused on really proprioception, and when I mean proprioception, I mean the stimulus that is acquired from the free nerve endings that we classify as proprioceptors, which are Golgi tendon organs, muscle spindles, and joint capsules. If you don't have those that are offering you precision weighted raw sensory data, precise information about your body's position in space, then what you're feeling in real time, that shakiness, both like qualitatively and experientially, that shakiness is the difference between the technique that's in their mind and the sense data that their brain offers them in real time, right? It's called predictive error signaling. And that's when you see shakiness, you need to do one of two things. You need to either improve the motor pattern of what they're doing. And this is where like visualization is like actually like the tool, and it could be exposure. It doesn't have to be sit there, close your eyes, cross-legged, singing Kumbaya. It could be, hey, I want you to watch me do a full set of this, right? And it could be you providing them more inputs to fortify that motor pattern prior to its first initiation. But then there are things that you can do that improve the precision data, the precision weighting of the raw sensory data, which is like, hey, can you stand on one leg? Right? Have we contracted this muscle before? Can we, if we did a single leg RDL before this, if we did some quad extensions before this, if we did some static stretching or foam rolling before this, they are going to narrow the gap from both ends between the motor pattern that they generate to initiate the movement and the prediction error caused by the precision weighting of the raw sensory data. You can move both of these together like some fucking Indiana Jones room, and you can really close that gap. And what do you see? The shakiness goes away, right? The execution becomes more precise. And over time, what happens is we learn to trust. The more precise our raw sensory data is, we learn to trust it. Because for me now, if I feel some pain, see ya. Right? Because like to your point earlier, it's like you don't even know what the difference between pain and discomfort is. You don't even know your ear hole from your asshole. We can't really trust your raw sensory data at all. But now after 20 years, right? You know now if you were to go out and start hucking long balls from outfield trying to gun people out at home base, you like, nope, I'm done. Because that raw sensory data is laser precise. Right. So I think it's about understanding that, look, learning is about minimizing the gap in predictive error signaling. And how do you do that? It's like, well, pretty much all you have to do is get better resolution, higher resolution exposures to the motor patterns that you're generating. That'll move the needle, and then get higher quality precision sense data. And then all of a sudden your ability, the way that I describe it is like, okay, we got a piece of paper. Follow us on YouTube. Jay Marsh, clip it. So you're here, right? So you're over here. This is your raw sensory data. This is here. I should use this to white balance the screen next time. This is your motor pattern. But this is the distance in between. And that's, I mean, let's just say this is a large distance. Right. And it's like, okay, this person sucks at a particular exercise. How do we cut? And this is like the time it would take to traverse the ideal execution of the movement and them reaching that ideal. When you can like give them better exposures to how the motor pattern is to play out. Right? Like, hey, I really want you to watch me this time. Imagine what it would feel like to anticipate the ground on heel strike. So don't like slap your foot down. Give them as many salient cues as possible. And then before you do that, give them some awareness and increase the precision of the raw sensory data. When you understand that this is the track that we're on, you don't have to play this game and traverse your client across this chasm. You can just do this. I've arrived. Those 2 points are now right. Like you can increase the learning. You can increase the learning speed so much if you understand where, okay, we're here and we're here. Do we have to do this linear thing of just bashing our head against the wall for these? No. I know that if I give you better information of what this is meant to do or how this is meant to look and feel, and that I improve the quality of your raw sense data, I can compress that time down to nothing, and I can teach you shit so fast. And like when it comes to rehab and back to our conversation about pain, if I need to teach you to get out of pain, like that's where you start to really win in the rehab game, is when you can do what I just did with that paper, but do it in real life. Like if you can fucking time travel and get people back on their feet in like 6 weeks, that should take a year.
Yeah.
People will pay you to time travel.
Yeah. And kind of to double down on that point, like increasing people's perception of the raw sensory data there, I think a lot of that comes from the way you have dialogue around pain. And like I was saying, it's not all or nothing, right? It's not, are you in pain? The question I prefer is, what are you feeling? Because they don't know how to interpret that off the jump. Like they feel something bad and that is pain. But that's not necessarily the case a lot of times. If you get them to reach a little bit deeper and describe not just that they're feeling something, but what it is that they're feeling. Like, is your quad burning? Is there a stabbing sensation in your knee? Let alone like that the type of pain that they're feeling will give you a lot of information. Like, is this more inflammatory, slow pain? Is this sharp tissue damage, fast pain? Like what exactly is the root of what you're feeling? And is this, metabolite buildup in your quads? Getting them to understand, like, there are different perceptions that you will have, and not every bad sensation is pain. So if we can start to build that relationship between which sensations are acceptable and actually the ones you should be feeling versus which ones are unacceptable and we shouldn't be feeling, then that allows them to close that gap a lot faster too, because now you're giving them ownership over what they're feeling. It's like, okay, I should be feeling XYZ. I shouldn't be feeling ABC. So when I feel these things, it's okay. I'm not going to be fearful. And then when if I'm feeling, ABC, then I'm going to shut it down. And that's something that the perception of that only strengthens over time when you can lead them in the right direction. Is that, okay, these are the things that we need to be feeling to have progress. And then, 1, 2, 3 weeks, 2 months go by and they continue to feel those things. They continue to see progress. That just strengthens that relationship that, okay, these sensations are positive, even if they're negative in the moment, versus the ones that are negative in the moment that will be negative long-term.
I think it's like, I look at it like, we're movement connoisseurs, right? Like your sommeliers, or yeah, exactly. But it's because what quality is really about quality. And it's like, if I think I don't care enough now, finally at 35 years old, to
Just
really
jaded.
just so, yeah. I mean, you know what it is? I'm just so certain of
Yeah.
like the
Mhm.
results that I've been able to get and the opportunities that we get based off of those results, based off of the principles that precede and generate these results. That I'm like, I'm just like, I don't have time. Like, I don't have time to sit here and argue about progressive overload anymore. It's like my phone is ringing and I need to go do my job better than someone else, because it's like it's just based off of better principles, right? Like I think training is undergoing something of a philosophical revolution. I think a lot of stuff, and I really think AI is a part of this, where it's like, we really based a lot of our philosophies off of old ideas, and we tried them for a long time. And I think this is true in a lot of disciplines. Like, the world of physics, I think, is undergoing somewhat of a revolution right now, and space-time physics is sort of under fire. And why? Because at a certain point, this didn't bear the fruit that our philosophical forefathers told us it would. We're still not that far along, right? Or at least we weren't on old paradigms. So it's like, we can keep doing research about foam rolling and wasting money, or we can go back to the drawing board and say, hey, the initial bedrock of our Inquisition set us on maybe not a wrong trajectory, because I think we figured out a lot of stuff, but it's not going to get us to where we need to go. We need to change the underlying question, which is the philosophy, to then use the science to find the answers that we need to find. And I think that's kind of what this conversation is really embodying, because pain science, like pain docs are, look, it's well, right. Bay Area pain docs are nuts, bro. Like, they're just insane. Now, the tricky part is, do they help break the cycle? Are some of them diligent? Yes. But I think pain docs are worthy as much scrutiny as our dumbass friends that we went to Cairo school with, right? Like, and I think all of us are in need of something of a philosophical readjustment, pun intended, right? So I think this is, I could probably do another 10 hours on this, but I want people to kind of leave with the idea that, okay, if I had to hit a takeaway, it would be that pain is in part a sensation, but like all sensations is governed by our perception. And in order to know how to manipulate pain, we need to know how to manipulate our perceptions.
Yeah. That's it, man. I think we did it justice in an
May
hour.
this be the most insightful podcast we've ever done.
I like it. This is a really good one. There's a lot of good takeaways from this one. It's different from kind of where we've been lately, so I like it.
Well, I hope if you guys like it, do the thing where you share it on Instagram again.
Yeah.
What happened to that?
Some love.
Yeah, it used to be like, I can't with the boomers, because I listen to a lot of podcasts that delve in these topics, and it's all old philosophy, and it's all, you can tell, you know what it is, you can tell when people don't actually work in person and they just do podcasts, because it's like, oh yeah, this is an easy thing to just espouse old philosophy, but like if you do it in real life, you realize it doesn't work and you have to change your approach, and this is the changed approach.
That's it.
That's it. See you next week.